Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, a very warm welcome to everyone logging in. I'm afraid my connection isn't great, and so I can't show my face, but I'm David Mills, and I'm Deputy Director of the Centre for Global Higher Education, and it's a real pleasure to be introducing not just Lynn McAlpine, Professor for Higher Education, who's going to be chairing today's webinar, and Adem Asegedebedebe, who is also co-convener of this 4-part series. And this is something which Centre for Global Higher Education is quite keen to promote, which is a themed set of webinars on a certain set of issues. And we've chosen, very importantly, for this series, African research, African researchers, and their future in a global academic system. This is a topic which we haven't talked about much within many of our CGHE webinars, but we feel, given the future of Africa's position within a global system, this is a really important topic to think about. So we have 4 webinars coming up. Today, Lynn will introduce Otilia, and then we have 3 more. One which is on the Ethiopian higher education system and its political economy, Abebe Zegeye, who is a very experienced administrator and leader of Ethiopian higher education. And then we have Kudus Adebayo, who is a postdoctoral fellow in Nigeria, who'll be talking about Nigerian academic mobility. And then finally, we have Jimmy Spias Ntongo from Uganda, talking about academic publishing politics in Uganda. So I really hope we're going to have a diverse and rich mixture of topics. We can't cover the whole of the African research landscape. We haven't got anyone from French West Africa, unfortunately. That we'll just have to do another series. We're very aware of that, and this is just a starter to get these conversations going. And we really welcome all your comments and reflections on this series. I'll say one more thing before I hand over to Lynn. We're very aware that some people won't be able to come today because our academic union in the UK has called strike action. This is really important, that our unions are able to sort of mobilize around academic work and pay conditions. And we're super aware that this is not just the UK issue. My colleagues in Ghana have been on strike for a while, and I'm also very aware that union activism in other parts of Africa is really important. So this is really just an acknowledgement of the importance of these issues. They're things that we within Centre for Global Higher Education are very aware of and take very seriously. So we send our solidarity to our colleagues. So that's enough from me. I'm going to hand over to Lynn now, who is going to do a bit of housekeeping. Lynn's my colleague who's helped co-convene this series, and she'll also introduce Otilia. Lynn, it's over to you.
Thanks very much, David. Yes, welcome to everybody, wherever you are in the globe. Today, as you heard already, you're going to be hearing from Otilia Chiramba. She's now a research fellow at the University of Johannesburg, and she's one at the present time of the lead researchers in a project about epistemic disruptions in reconstituting higher education pedagogy in South Africa. Now, Otilia and I first met 5 years ago when we both became involved in an initiative of the Global Young Academy, and it was to carry out a study about young scientists in Africa. And so we were both involved in studying early career researchers from 14 African countries. And today she's going to talk about what we found, but focusing particularly on postdoctoral fellows. But before I hand over, I have to do this brief housekeeping, which if you've been part of the seminar series before, you'll know what it's all about. So the seminar is being recorded, and tomorrow morning, you'll be able to get it on the CGHE website, as well as a transcript of the chat function conversation. We ask you please to keep muted unless you've been asked to speak. And you really don't have to have your video on. It may be easier for you not to have your video on during the webinar. But if you're asked to speak, please do so when you have that opportunity. We also recommend using the speaker view so you can more clearly see who is talking. And the way we're going to handle the discussion is whenever you have a question, if you could type it into the chat function, write out the question. And when Otilia is finished, I'll then call on different people who've posted questions and ask them to turn on their mics and ask their question, and Otilia will have a chance to respond. And I think that's it. So what I'd like to do now is pass over to Otilia.
Thank you so much, Lynn. Let me share my slides now. Can you hear me? Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. And thank you, Lynn, for introducing me. This presentation is about biographical narratives of African postdoctoral fellows in a global academy. So I'll first of all let you know about the main sources of data for this presentation. So this presentation draws from a global State of Young Scientists Africa project, which we called a GloSYS project, which is a global young academy initiative that involved 14 African countries. Like Lynn has already said, we met in this project, and I started as a research assistant, and then we analyzed data together and wrote the report. So this was actually a mixed method research, which involved PhDs and master's students. So they started by completing a survey, and after completing a survey, we invited them for an interview, and we actually now chose to interview PhDs, and for the 57 PhDs, we actually nearly interviewed all of them. So these interviewees identified themselves as early career researchers. And then among these early career researchers, that's where we found a group called Post-doctoral fellows. And they have interesting stories, which I thought maybe if we share. And I'm also using my experience as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Johannesburg, you know, and I see we share more or less similar experiences with these. And after doing the collection of data and writing of the report, we also got into an initiative of writing down the narratives for those participants. So I'm also drawing data from the paper we wrote with Lynn and some other colleagues who were also involved in the project. So again, we wrote 2 papers with Lynn and Matt that were just published this year around that. So what is my co-argument here? So my co-argument is, while there is growing research on the experiences of early career researchers, we really lack research that specifically focuses on African postdoctoral fellows. Secondly, we also lack knowledge about how African postdoctoral fellows navigate the PDRF terrain outside their countries, and sorry, that was a typo, outside their countries and become successful. So I decided to use the biographical narratives as we did with the other papers we've written, because I saw that it's rich. It actually provides us with the data we're looking for, looking at the uniqueness of each individual's experience, and then move on to the commonalities to understand in a comprehensive manner how we can, improve these experiences in a holistic manner. So I have three questions to answer in this presentation. What structural factors did postdoctoral fellows report as having impacted on their experiences as they navigate their fellowships? Secondly, how do they describe their futures? And thirdly, what interventions might improve their experiences? So in terms of structural factors, we're actually looking again at their home experiences, then national experiences, looking at both the national and then institutional experiences. So I thought there are some concepts we need to define so that you know how they are used in this presentation. So we have postdoctoral research fellow, which I define as someone who has received a time-limited post-PhD fellowship, not always a staff position, usual not institutional affiliation beyond acceptance by host institutions. And the other term which the participants identify themselves as the post-PhD researcher, which when someone gets hired by a PI, principal investigator, and get a contract to do work on the project, and then usually there are also no institutional affiliations. So I take both terms to mean the same, and I'll use these interchangeably because they apply to the model of the postdoc fellowship I know. So it is surprising that of the 8 postdoctoral fellows I found in this project of early career researchers, all of them are actually doing their postdoctoral fellowship outside their countries. So it seems many of them were actually left to, look for greener pastures or look for opportunities to do their work. And it didn't start with the postdoctoral fellowship. Most of them left their countries when they went to do their PhDs. And that actually, encouraged me to, look at why they decided to leave their countries. And the push and pull factor theory, which was originated by Lynn 1966, actually helps us to understand why people migrate. That's what he did. He was looking at why people migrate in general, but closer to what I'm doing, Mazarao and Sota were looking at why students choose to study outside their own countries. And closer to Africa, we have Maringe and Carter, who also looked at students and their choices of studying abroad. So the main question here, is what pushed these participants out of their countries? So literature is documented by the above mentioned scholars, shows that people leave their countries, or students leave their countries due to economic climate, political climate, home research capacity, and availability of desired programs. And what really pull them to the other nations? So factors like economic and political stability, educational reputation, funding, availability of research infrastructure are documented by these scholars. So easy access to information about the host nation also proved to be, one of the factors which help these people to move away from their from their homes to the host nations. So this is this theory, is very relevant for this study because it has helped me to see why of all the postdoc in this research I decided to study abroad. So I'll move on to look at the cameos. I actually deployed, as the topic suggests, my title suggests, is the biographical narratives of these postdoctoral fellows. So I think these cameos will actually help us to get the uniqueness of these individuals on how they actually experience their postdoctoral journeys and giving the intersections behind how they felt in the whole experience. So I start by documenting, like talking about their individual trajectories, of which I'll present the stories right now, and then we learn from the stories their unique challenges or their unique opportunities as they try to navigate the postdoctoral fellowship. And then from those experiences, unique experiences, then I look for patterns across each individual to see what's common in this individual and what's uncommon in those individuals. So allow me to remove this and share my narratives. And can you see my narratives now, Lynn? Hello?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Sure. Right. So of the 8 postdoctoral fellows, I only chose to share with you 3 cameos. These are short, narratives from the postdoctoral fellows that actually shows us how they experienced the impact of their homes, the impact of, I can't really talk about their postdoctoral fellowship without looking at their PhD experiences, because it's kind of, they moved out of their countries seeking for opportunities to do doctoral studies, and then after finishing, they see other opportunities around, postdoctoral fellowship. So I start with the participant Benjamin. These are all pseudonyms. We have also used in the report and other publications we have already done. So as he's postdoc, and he was doing his postdoc in Eastern Asia. And Benjamin was an academic in his home country and applied for a bonded PhD fellowship outside Africa. During this PhD, the experience was so challenging. He took counseling for depression. His unsupportive supervisor charged Benjamin with spending too much time with his family on the weekend instead of the lab work. After his PhD, he applied for jobs outside Africa, and he experienced racism in successive interviews. For instance, being told they never hired Africans since they are not qualified enough. On returning home, he found only a temporary post in his home university, so could not apply for research funding since he was temporary. You can't apply for that. Further, he received no pay 1 month, and with the worsening economy, could not support his family. After 6 months, he applied for postdoc contracts abroad and took the only one offered in Asia. There, besides dealing with linguistic difficulties that limited applying for grants, the racism continued. For example, at conferences, he gets comments like, if you are African, you are not smart enough. Still, his supervisor is great, helping him whenever I have challenges, even about his family. With his contract ending, he's applying for assistant professorship abroad since there are no home jobs, and hopes he can do research on his home country to create better opportunities there. And meanwhile, he mentors home graduate students whenever he can. So this is Benjamin's story. Now I move on to Olivia's story, also a postdoc. She's from Southern Africa, but she got she did a PhD in a country again outside. She did PhD outside their own country, but still in the Southern Africa. Also, before PhD, Olivia wanted to continue her research, but instability in a home country meant her research area was underdeveloped. She searched and found a master's program in another African country, so moved there. She stayed there to do a PhD. During PhD, the program she was doing was new, so she was using undergrad labs, and limited funding meant finding consumables elsewhere, all of which slowed progress. After a PhD, she returned home after graduating since she was bonded, but for only one semester since the contract did not specify how long I was supposed to be at home for. She decided to seek a postdoc in a PhD country and tried a PhD university, but learned the hiring policy privileged citizens over those from elsewhere. So she found a postdoc in another university, though the low salary makes it hard to survive. Every month end, I ask myself why I didn't do accounting instead. Still, she has the research resources she needs, and life is more stable than at home. Though she sometimes finds the racialized tensions outside of work difficult, gender too is sometimes an issue at work. She hopes for a secure academic post and is prepared to move institutions, but has no plans to return home. If I can be a successful female scientist, then other young ladies will take up scientific careers. And I move on to our last story by Emily. We had a postdoc in Europe, and she completed a PhD in Western Europe. Since going abroad for a PhD, she hasn't returned home to work, receiving funding from different sources for a research and working in a number of European countries. At the moment, she's sponsored by a funding agency in Western Europe in collaboration with another funding agency in her home country. She has an affiliation to a public research institution in her home country. Emily has a child who is 5 years old, but he isn't with her in Europe. I miss my son very much. I couldn't bring him with me here. Emily is thankful for her mother. Without her, I would not do anything. She's caring for my son. She's helping me read with him over the internet. She feels supported by the institution she is hosted by, because she can access lots of supplies, equipment, and instruments in the lab. But in my home country, the situation is different. Moreover, in her effort to be productive, she has failed to strike a balance between her work and her social life. Until this moment, I can't manage work all the time, and this affects my personal life. She thinks her host institution in Western Europe is more developed than her home institution in terms of supplies and equipment in the laboratory. This is why you need to search for a funding agency to help you to study abroad. Emily feels that a major challenge for getting traction for science in a home country is the question of how to make science beneficial to people. This regards people in a home country who are not feeling that science helps them. So Emily is thinking of how she can make science relevant to people with special focus on the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Working abroad has exposed Emily to some mistreatment in her work environment, though she is unsure what motivates the action. I don't know exactly whether this is from my religion, my race, my generation, even from my skin color, or if this person is not working nicely with all people. She feels it may be related to homeland, yes, to the media, sorry, on the time sending messages about people from her home country. In a homeland, Emily feels that because I'm female all the time, we are facing difficulties. Emily also thinks that in a home country, they ignore young scientists. They are thinking all the time about professors, and young scientists are totally ignored. Emily's future intention is to ground herself in academia along with a group of students and build up her laboratory. She would like to have more than one project, as she feels that through this, she may be able to help society she lives in. This may be hindered because there is no collaboration between the public research institution and third parties in a home country. Without this collaboration, she feels her hopes of benefiting the community through sciences might be difficult to achieve. So overall, we are looking at, I'm going back to my slides. So overall, these post-doctoral fellows are actually appreciating the support they are getting from the host nations and the host institutions because of the availability of the equipment. They ran away from their homes and they found that. And they are also highlighting collaboration, which is one of the things they prioritize to be successful in their research. So when it comes to supervisee experiences, the experiences vary from individual to individual. Some are nice to them, but others are not helpful at all. So now we see that there is an intersection of so many factors that come into play to these postdoctoral fellows. Some are personal and others are, home country factors that actually intersect with all that is happening within the host nation, and some are from the host nation itself. So what I argue here is we should actually prioritize the intersectionality between all among those factors which are impacting on these individuals. So from these stories now, we have actually learned that there are some problems around their personal factors in terms of work-life balance. So they actually failing, some of them failing to balance between work and their own social life. And because maybe there is a lot and they are overwhelmed by their workloads, and some were actually saying, even if we have 12 hours into this postdoctoral fellowship, but it seems we're working more than those 12 hours. So they are always aiming to produce articles because what is expected from them is to produce 2 articles per year, like what most of them said. So there are also reports of missing families. So we see all those, factors, personal factors, are actually impacting on how they are going to navigate their postdoctoral fellowship within the academy. So in terms of home factors and impact on these individuals, there is interaction of individual and structural factors in individuals' career trajectories. So these structural factors include the home factors, and from home, most of them, like the literature we have read on push and pull factors, we have seen it's about political unrest and upheaval, whereby there is political instability in their country, and when there is political and economic instability, it's so hard to be sure that the universities are functioning, because it affects the whole system or the whole nation. So they also talked about the policies, home national policies, not actually supporting them pursuing their studies. So such factors around funding, is most of them left their home countries because they couldn't find funding, and some of them couldn't find appropriate supervisors who can help them within their, PhD journeys. They, remember I said they came there, in pursuing their PhDs, and then they decided to do their postdoctoral, fellowship. And again, they also talked about, when they reached their host nations, they were into doing their PhD and then support their African countries. Most of them still think of going back to their home countries, but given the situation, they are afraid that their careers might, stop, because there is not much support within their home countries. So those factors around their home countries won't allow them to go there, but at the same time, they aspire to help others they left home to develop their research interests and, pursue it. So in terms of host nation, host institution, I documented host institution factors and impact on these individuals. So that is where the major problem is, because that's where they spend most of their time, in the host institutions. So they are talking about conditions of work, about the workload, and lack of definition of their roles and responsibilities about what they should be doing, because some of them were saying you get to an institution and then you are given this project of which you don't have interest in, and then you don't perform to your best because it's not your area. Then job and financial insecurity was one of the major problems, because when you are a postdoc fellow, you are not in a permanent position, so you have you don't have medical aid and all those things required for basic survival. Then supervisor-supervisee relationship, they were documenting, they were talking about issues of, how some supervisors, look down upon them. Like you heard from one of them who talked about the only focusing on those who are only looking down upon the postdoctoral fellows, and prioritizing anything from the professors. So those were some of the things. And racism, discrimination were also mentioned as one of those factors that also impact on these participants. So concerning the host, this should be the host nation. There is racism even outside the university. There is linguistic difficulty, which is an issue within and without the universities themselves, but within the nation. Then they also mentioned xenophobia, like, factors around hatred of foreign nationals because they tend to take their jobs. So then after documenting this in these three factors, main factors, the personal, the host institution, the national, and the overall experience within the host nation. They also talked about their future progression intentions, and putting them together, I'll find out that they were talking about finding permanent positions in academia as one of their, future progression, building their own labs to create job opportunities for young researchers back home, and keep international collaboration, because one thing they don't want to leave their host nations is fear of losing those kind of collaboration which were useful to them. They will also aim to advocate for funding for young researchers in Africa, advocate for women advancement in STEM. So then putting all this together, I thought of, okay, what can happen? What can we do, or what impactful interventions can help these postdoctoral fellows? I haven't done this in an exhaustive manner, but I'm sure given the cameos and the analysis of data I have just done, you can come up with some other interventions that are very useful to this group of people. So most institutions should rethink the postdoctoral research model, which means they should define roles and responsibilities for postdoctoral fellows, training supervisors on how to make the experience of these individuals more beneficial, and also create opportunities to research more in their areas of interest. Mentorship came as a big issue to them because they really need to grow in their career, and then they also need to be acknowledged and respected, because most of them were saying, if you are a postdoc fellow, you are referred to as a student. They think of you as a student, yet you are past that, and you are just like those ones who went straight to jobs as lecturers. So they feel being disrespected and not acknowledged. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Otilia. At the same time, your stories were rather overwhelming in terms of issues around well-being, families, responsibilities and separation, constant mobility. There's a lot of things going on here that are interacting life and work and trying to advance their careers. I'm sure there are people who have questions who would like that they would like to ask. And I wonder if people have similar ideas about their experiences, but also if they have other ideas for interventions that might be useful and interesting. Now that's interesting. David has asked a question, and he wants to ask you about the attitudes to these postdocs amongst African higher education institutions. David, would you like to ask that?
Well, thank you, Otilia. That was really important and really grounded. And I love your vignettes very much. They reveal an awful lot about all the structural factors that impact on people's lives and the human aspects of these journeys. I'd be interested to know a bit more about the challenge of bringing that international experience back in terms of applying for jobs, applying for fellowships, or even academic posts in sort of home countries, whatever that is, and what, how that experience is viewed? Because my understanding is sometimes it's not viewed positively, or it can be quite hard to reintegrate. Did you discuss that with people?
Let's hope I got you right, David. Yeah. So I understand you're asking about the attitudes of those in the African countries, African institutions, about their migration to do their postdocs. Is that so, David?
Well, less
Or
attitudes,
you
but
want
also
to clarify that.
that's fine. No, it's also career opportunities and attitudes to that experience. How valued is that experience seen? How successful are people when they apply for academic posts? It's about the sort of the return migration, I guess.
So it's about in Africa, how are
Yes.
institutions in Africa responding?
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's a very good question, actually, because it touches on negativity from some institutions around those postdoctoral fellows. Remember, they did not only go to abroad, like outside Africa. Some of them were actually within Africa, but in other regions. But they also faced similar challenges like they faced in abroad, outside Africa. And it's even worse because applying and getting these postdoctoral fellowships it's not always given, because most of them did so many applications and couldn't get, and maybe on their last or fifth or last application they get. So it's not easy in the African context itself as well as abroad. So they are facing more or less similar challenges abroad and in the African continent. And also in terms of, it's actually worsened because of funding. In terms of funding, even if they apply for funding, it's most of the time they don't get it. So it's most probably that there are many of these people who really want to pursue their careers, be it inside Africa or outside, but they are barred from doing that because of the different negative experiences around them.
Thank you. That's really helpful, Otilia. It's interesting you're saying it's no easier. And yes, the negative experiences are everywhere. Thank you very much.
Right, and thank you, Otilia. I also had a question which had to do, like these stories seem to be showing how people were being challenged to manage things that were important to them in their lives and things that were important to them in their work in trying to advance their careers. Did you see any pattern in the way that, for instance, people would make decisions around family rather than career? Like, how did they manage or experience this tension?
Oh, yes. Thank you so much, Lynn. There is a lot of, documented experiences of this around, making a choice between their personal lives or their social lives and their own career. Like some of them would give up, going for a PhD abroad because they have young children, and then they choose the career over, they choose the family over their careers. And one of these postdoctoral fellows got a postdoctoral fellow abroad, but then she wanted to marry the boyfriend and become a family. So she chose to remain in the country so that they wed before she thinks of a career, opportunities. So it was a matter of, and there are others who actually chose their careers over. I can't necessarily say that they chose their careers over their families, because they would make plans around how to navigate those challenges. Like I think it's Olivia who said, I had to leave my very small boy with my mother, and she would take good care of. So to those who could make better plans around their families, or think of prioritizing their careers over their families, they would have plans in place to do that.
Thank you. Now we've got a question from Jacob and then Leander. So Jacob, do you want to ask your question about success stories?
Yes,
Yes.
Thank you for the opportunity. Otilia, thank you for your nice presentation. I really enjoyed the presentation and the insight you have shared with us so far. But if you look at the experiences from the participants, you could see that it's more of better experiences so far. But I would like to find out, what are the success stories of these postdoctoral fellows abroad? Did your study consider that? If so, what were some of the things they were sharing? And if not, what are the future implications of all these? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jacob. Yes, I think that's an interesting factor to look at, because we want, the factors that help us to pave way for those who hear these stories. So, like I said, I think after the cameos, I gave a summary of how it was useful, the host nations were useful to their career trajectories, and how they saw their growth in doing whatever they were doing in STEM or in social sciences, but still they managed to do that amidst these challenges. So I think the reason for actually highlighting the challenges is to see how we can, remove these barriers to people who are trying to be successful, because they were actually successful in what they were doing, but they did that against the odds. So what I'm thinking around this is there are some people who are actually not succeeding, because remember, we're talking to people who are into a postdoctoral fellowship, but I want to believe, given these challenges and barriers, there are some people who failed to do that. It's only that we didn't look at those who failed to do when they did, because they were not part of, they were not in their group. So I think, as far as I see, we can see success here, but it is amid these challenges, because they are doing their postdoctoral fellowships, but they aspire for something more to that, like getting permanent positions. Otherwise, they feel like, they are now, they've reached the stage whereby they can, join the academia, if the postdoctoral fellowship is meant to make someone, fit the lectureship academia within universities and other research institutions. So Jacob, I wouldn't say it's bitter experience. They also have success stories of, managing to get lab equipment and everything to do their research. But at the same time, they are faced with many challenges. So my style of highlighting challenges is, how can we improve their experiences so that they have, improved experiences around, navigating their postdoctoral fellowships.
Thank you, Otilia. And now we have 3 questions waiting. So Leander, maybe you could go first, and then Adam, and then Kawazara.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was really interesting. My question had to do with the experiences of the people you spoke with. Without wanting to exceptionalize whatever they experience, especially those who migrated to countries outside of Africa, to what extent, just following up on David's earlier question, to what extent do you think that some of these experiences are equally common within the African context? And is the precarity that these individuals face, is that to do with their status as a postdoc, where you are not quite faculty, but you are no longer a PhD student, or it has to do with issues of race? I mean, you mentioned color and then other challenges that they face. So to what extent is the precarity to do with their status or the level that they are, rather than their own biological kind of characteristics as their color, gender, and so on and so forth? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Linda. So looking at the commonalities with the experience abroad and experience within African institutions, some of these experiences are just more or less similar, in that when it comes to the negative experiences, because it's only that they happen in a different manner. Like when it comes to abroad, outside Africa, they were talking about racism, like you said, and like they said in their cameos. But when it comes to these African experiences, you find something different. There is a discrimination of some sort around where do you come from. You are not from this country, and therefore they just tend to treat you like someone who's there to maybe steal the jobs. But when it comes to countries abroad, they were more into like looking down upon in terms of the skin color, but it didn't happen to all of them. Some of them are actually, talking about very positive experiences with some other people, and only pinpoint a few individuals who were not treating them in the manner they really expected to be treated within that. So what I can say is, in terms of positive experience, those who were reporting from the universities from abroad, they had, very positive experiences around, navigating their careers because of availability of equipment and everything they wanted to use. But when it comes to Africa, you heard one of the participants who said, oh, okay, so my research was new, so I had to go abroad or seek for research equipment to carry out my research. So in comparison, you see that those who reported from abroad, of the 8 who reported from abroad, they were actually, in terms of the research and working environment, it was very conducive for them. But since I said this study was on early career researchers, these were not the experiences of the postdoctoral. Some of the experiences are not only unique to postdoctoral fellows, but they also include some of the early career researchers who were doing their work abroad. So I tried to pick up what affects the postdoctoral fellows outside and inside Africa. So yes, So I can say from their cameos and from what they say, experiences from abroad were much better in terms of conducive environment, but in terms of racism and they were more or less similar to Africa, because racism is also there in Africa, and some other discriminative factors that are around different kinds of experiences. Thank you.
Thanks, Otilia. Okay, Adam, and then Kauzara, and I think Alois, I hope I'm saying that correctly. Those will probably be the last questions. So Adam, please.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Otilia, for your presentation. My question to you is especially from the direction of seeing the level of similarity about these concerns of precarity of for researchers or external challenges and factors between this African researchers or postdocs and even the non-African one, which is even in Oxford or in the UK that I observe, despite being one of the good universities or something. But one thing I'm realizing is, the motivation of social status or the sense of the weight attached to it, to postdoc or to PhD. So I wanted to ask you about how much the career of postdoc holds in your interviews or in your perceptions about, because in the context I'm working with, for example, in Ethiopia, even if the PhD or the professors are seen as a really poor kind of career choice, people do the PhD for the sake of the social status one, but after the PhD, they quit it. There isn't that much interest to go on forward with postdoc or researchers. The main factor is to hold the PhD and be called a doctor. So then the postdoc route or the researcher route becomes less motivating, and this precariousness and external factors weigh in even significantly more. So I want to ask you, in your context, how is the sense of social status or being social positioning seen among these early career researchers, especially after being called a doctor?
Thank you very much for your question. I think within the institutions, factors, I'm talking about now factors within the institutions, I think it carries a lot of weight, because people are into progressing. When you start your PhD, you are into progressing and become a professor. I don't see anyone just talking from within the institutions. I don't see anyone who is not aspiring to become a professor or to develop their own laboratories. So I think they hold weight within the universities. And eventually then they can hold weight outside, because the work you'll be doing is actually visible and can be seen outside. So I think it's not a matter of just getting the status, but people are actually trying to get elsewhere, as we learned from their future progression intentions, that they are aiming to do something, they're aiming to develop their own home countries through through that degree. They are aiming to even do more, so that the country can benefit from what they are doing. So from what I understand from their cameos and what they are saying, it really holds weight in terms of advancing their careers, in terms of improving their home countries and everything. So yeah, it might be a different scenario with what you are experiencing, but not much. Of course, maybe there are some people who are like that, because not all of them, when you find something to do which is out of academia, I think you just need to live and do that. But with this group of people, they actually aspire to do more and use what they have learned to advance their careers and their countries. Thank you.
Thank you. Kauzara.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Kalzara. I'm a policy officer for Africa and the Middle East at Universities UK. I just wanted to touch upon the mention about racial harassment when they're in Europe. And I wanted to ask if you think, I know at the moment UK universities are sort of trying to do work around racial harassment. There's been studies done, and there's been trying to be some, I guess, some more work to tackle racial harassment in universities. Do you think, based on what students from African students coming to the UK to sort of study as well, do you think there needs to be a special segment to tackle the issues? Because I feel like it's quite specific to African students coming from Africa. Do you think there's more work to be done to sort of tackle the issues specifically or directly within that? Because this is something that I could potentially feed back to the team that works on racial harassment at my organization, who sort of feedback and provide useful documentations for universities that want to work more on tackling racial harassment. So if this is whatever you feedback or whatever you say, I can sort of feed that back to them.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, obviously, if there is a problem, we can actually figure out some ways of trying to eliminate such problems to improve the experiences. So, you know, the starting point is to understand what's going on within their experiences, of which that is what I really try to do. And racial harassment is one of the things I saw as negative experiences to these students. So if maybe, I'm sure in many countries there are policies that work around social justice and, you know, integration of such people. So if there are policies like that, I think they are not actually working in some of the institutions, because when people experience such, you know, such factors. So what I think is the starting point is to see if the policies around that are working, and they should be effective, not just being on paper, and then make sure, you know, institutions also draw their policies from the national policies to make sure that the policies work effectively for all people around the university. So my contribution to that is, I know the encouragement around, you know, supporting and allowing integration of people who are different from you, and try to make the, you know, to make the environment conducive for everyone around that. So I think that's what I can say, but I'm sure there are some more things that can be done around, you know, such things.
Thank you. We have one more question. It's a clarification question that I'm going to ask you to respond to in a minute, Otilia, but I wanted also to say that I've posted in chat the Global Young Academy website, where you can find the stories of all 61 early career researchers. So Alois? You had a question, I think.
Hi, can I go ahead?
Oh, okay.
Hello?
Shall I read the question? I think the connection isn't very good. The question was one about clarity, Otilia. If you were only looking at international postdocs, because Alois is thinking that the experiences of local postdocs, people who did their PhDs in their home countries or working in their home countries, are also neglected.
Oh, okay, yes. Of course, I'm aware there are some people who are doing postdocs in their home countries, but I've taken these participants from this broader project we're working on, and it so happened that I only got those who are doing, all of them, 8 of them are doing their postdoctoral fellowship outside their own countries. So I'm sure that's an area of focus we need to pursue in future to see the experiences of those who are doing PhDs in their own country, I mean, postdoctoral fellowship in their own countries, and see how they are similar or different from the ones who are doing abroad. I think that's a very good question, and moving forward, I think we really need to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Otilia, for this presentation, and thank you to everyone for the questions. If you look in the chat, you'll also see the link to the session next Tuesday, which is about the political economy of knowledge production in Ethiopian higher education. And Kazo Zara has also provided us with a link to Universities UK about racial harassment. So
Okay.
thank you, everybody, for participating today, and we hope to see you next Tuesday. Have a nice weekend. Bye.
Sure. Thank you very much. Bye.